My name is Caitlyn Foster, and at 31, I thought I knew my family's playbook. But that night at our Portland dinner table, my parents blindsided me. Your brother's wedding needs to be perfect, Mom declared, her tone final like she was closing a deal. We're using your college fund. My stomach dropped. $75,000 money I hadn't touched in years was theirs to spend. I forced a tight smile, my pulse racing, and said, I want him to be happy too. But inside, I was fuming. They didn't know I'd graduated college debt-free, built my own path, and didn't need their so-called support. They saw me as the kid who'd just go along. Then my phone lit up a voicemail from the wedding venue, some fancy hotel in downtown Portland. Your deposit check bounced. The manager said, voice sharp. Payments due tomorrow or the booking's gone. I stared across the table at my parents, their laughter grating, clueless that they'd already dipped into my money. They had no idea what I was holding back. If you've ever been steamrolled by family, smash that like button, subscribe, and tell me your story in the comments. Growing up in a Portland suburb, I learned early that my family's attention gravitated toward my brother, Derek Foster. In our modest two-story home, I was the quiet kid hunched over a clunky desktop, teaching myself to code at 13. My parents, Linda Foster and Thomas Foster, barely noticed their focus on Derek's charm and big plans. Caitlyn, don't waste time on that computer, Mom would say, her voice sharp, urging me to join the family's chatter. I kept at it, driven not by their approval, but by a spark I couldn't ignore. School became my refuge, where I dove into math and computer science, my straight A's and competition wins stacking up unnoticed at home. At 15, I built my first app, a quiz tool for students cramming for exams. I uploaded it to a free platform expecting nothing. Then checks arrived, $50, then $100. By year's end, I'd earned $5,000. Excited, I showed Mom a printout of my earnings. She glanced at it, shrugged, and said, That's nice, Caitlyn, but help your brother with his homework. Derek, 3 years older, was coasting through community college applications. I bit my tongue, stashing the money in a secret savings account. That app wasn't just code, it was my first taste of independence. By 17, I was ready to push further. High school's computer lab became my second home, where I worked on a new project, a platform connecting students with online tutors. Late nights sketching designs and testing code paid off when a Portland tutoring chain tested it. We want to integrate this. Their manager emailed offering a licensing deal for $50,000. I signed, hands shaking, and deposited the money into my private account. My parents thought I was just a studious kid, unaware of the contracts piling up. I let them believe it, knowing they'd see my success as a resource for Derek's endless needs. College was my next step. My grades and coding portfolio earned a partial scholarship to the University of Washington, covering half my tuition. The rest came from my app earnings, no family fund needed. Mom called once asking about my scholarship life. It's fine, I said, dodging details. She didn't press, assuming I was scraping by. In my freshman dorm, I saw a chance to scale my tutoring platform, now called Learn Easy. Between classes and all-nighters, I added features like live chat and progress tracking. At a Seattle tech meetup, I pitched to a room of strangers, my voice steady, despite nerves. A local investor pulled me aside. This could be big, she said, offering to buy a 10% stake. I incorporated Learn Easy and sold it for $100,000, funding a part-time coder and a shared office near campus. Hiding my success was deliberate. I'd seen how my parents funneled money to Derek new gadgets, car payments, while I worked alone. Once Derek showed up at my dorm leaning on his new car, asking for gas money. I'm broke. I lied, keeping my bank balance locked away. He shrugged, saying, Mom'll handle it, and drove off. I didn't care about their assumptions. I cared about protecting what I'd built. My professors saw my drive. Dr. Chen, a computer science mentor, recommended me for a campus startup incubator. You're ahead of the curve, he said. I got in, gaining mentors and access to tech events. By my second semester, Learn Easy had 12,000 users, mostly high schoolers and freshmen. I hired a classmate for user support, freeing me to code. Keeping my double life quiet was about control. At a family barbecue, I overheard Mom praising Derek's latest job while I flipped burgers. I almost mentioned Learn Easy but stopped when Dad shifted the topic to Derek's deals. I stayed silent, my resolve firming. They didn't need to know. My scholarship story held up, letting me work in peace. By 19, Learn Easy was a steady machine. I opened a business account, hired a bookkeeper for taxes, and kept my savings separate. Every new user, every contract was a step toward a future my family couldn't touch. I wasn't just building a company, I was building my freedom. My first year at the University of Washington was a whirlwind, but by my junior year, Learn Easy was no longer a dorm room project. I was 20, juggling classes and a growing user base, thousands of students using my tutoring platform daily. I hired 2 more coders and a designer, all part-time, to keep up with demand. A Seattle-based edtech company took notice. They invited me to their sleek office downtown, all glass and open desks. "Your platform's impressive," their CEO said, leaning forward. "We want to acquire a stake." After weeks of negotiations, I sold 15% of Learn Easy for $300,000. That deal pushed my savings into the millions, a number I could barely process. I moved the funds to a secure investment account far from anyone's reach. With college behind me, I set my sights higher. My professors had always pushed me toward grad school, and Stanford's MBA program was the dream. I applied, leveraging my startup's success and a near-perfect GPA. When the acceptance email arrived, I sat in my tiny apartment staring at the screen, a mix of pride and disbelief washing over me. The tuition was steep, tens of thousands a year, but I covered it with my own money, no loans, no family fund. Mom called the day I moved to California. "Stanford's expensive, Caitlyn," she said, her voice tinged with worry. "Are you sure about this?" I nodded into the phone, muttering about scholarships. She didn't know my net worth was now $6 million, and I wasn't about to tell her. At a tech conference in San Francisco, I met Justin Perry. He was 22, sharp, working on his own edtech startup. We bonded over late-night coffee, debating user interfaces and market trends. "You're killing it with Learn Easy," he said, his eyes bright with respect. I hesitated, then shared the truth. My sales, my investments, the millions I'd stashed away. Justin didn't flinch. "You built that from nothing," he said, grinning. "Own it." For the first time, I felt seen, not as a student or a sister, but as a founder. We started dating, and I let him in on my secret, knowing he'd keep it. Justin became my sounding board, challenging my ideas, celebrating my wins. Back home, my family had no clue. Derek Foster dropped by during a visit to Portland, sprawling on my old couch like he owned it. "Heard you're at Stanford," he said, smirking. "Bet that's costing Mom and Dad a fortune." I shrugged, letting him assume I was drowning in debt. He didn't need to know I'd paid cash for my tuition, my apartment, everything. Mom and Dad were the same. At a family dinner, Dad asked how I was getting by in California. "Fine," I said, steering the conversation away. They still thought my college fund was my lifeline, that I was scraping through grad school on their dime. I let them believe it, remembering the times they'd bailed Derek out, car payments, rent, even a new TV when his broke. Stanford was intense. The MBA program threw me into case studies, pitches, and late-night strategy sessions. I thrived, using Learn Easy as my real-world lab. I expanded the platform, adding AI-driven study plans and partnering with schools across California. By my second year, Learn Easy had 50,000 users and a small but loyal team. I hired a CFO, a sharp woman from my cohort, to manage the growing finances. Every deal, every new feature added to my wealth, but I kept it locked down. Justin was the only one who knew the full scope. "You're building an empire," he'd say, half joking, as we brainstormed over takeout. Hiding my success wasn't just about privacy, it was survival. I'd seen how Mom and Dad funneled money to Derek, no questions asked. Once at a holiday gathering, Mom pulled me aside. "Can you help Dare with his rent?" she whispered, glancing at him, laughing with cousins. I shook my head, citing grad school expenses I didn't have. Her frown deepened, but she dropped it. Derek never paid his own way, new clothes, new trips always on their tab. I wasn't going to let my work bankroll his life. By 25, I was a Stanford grad with a thriving startup and a fortune I'd built myself. My parents still called asking about scholarship checks or part-time jobs. I'd smile through the phone, giving vague answers. They didn't know I'd never touched their fund, that I didn't need it. I was free, but the weight of their assumptions lingered. I wasn't ready for what came next. Returning to Portland for a rare family dinner, I stepped into my parents' house, the familiar scent of roast chicken hitting me. The dining room table was set, candles flickering, but the warmth felt hollow. Mom Linda Foster bustled in the kitchen, calling out to Dad Thomas Foster to grab more wine. Derek Foster. My brother lounged at the table, scrolling his phone, his fiancée Melissa Carter beside him, chatting about wedding flowers. I forced a smile, my stomach already twisting. I'd built a $6 million empire with LearnEasy, but my family still saw me as the kid scraping by. Tonight, I'd learn how far their assumptions went. We sat down, plates piled high. Mom started, her voice bright but firm. Caitlyn, we need to talk about Derek's wedding. It's a big moment for the family. I nodded, waiting. She continued. The venue's expensive, but we're using your college fund to cover it. You're okay with that, right? My fork froze midair. The room seemed to shrink, their faces blurring as my pulse spiked. My college fund, I asked, voice low, hoping I'd misheard. Dad nodded, casual, like it was no big deal. It's just sitting there, Caitlyn. Derek needs it more. I set my fork down, hands trembling under the table. How much are we talking? I pressed, keeping my tone even. Mom glanced at Derek, then back at me. $15,000 for the deposit. It's a top-tier hotel in Portland. My mind raced. That fund, $75,000, was mine, untouched since high school. I'd paid for college, Stanford, everything without it. They didn't know that, but they also didn't ask. You already took money from it, I said, my voice sharper now. $25,000 2 years ago. For an SUV and Kyle Ramsey's debts. The table went silent. Derek's phone clattered onto his plate. Melissa looked confused, her eyes darting to him. Mom's smile faltered, but she recovered fast. Caitlyn, that was for family needs. Derek's job required a reliable car, and Kyle's like a son to us. Dad stayed quiet, cutting into his chicken, avoiding my gaze. Derek leaned forward, his tone defensive. Come on, sis, it's not like you were using it. You're at Stanford, right? Scholarships and all that. His smirk made my blood boil. He knew exactly what he'd done. I took a breath, steadying myself. I paid for Stanford myself, Derek. Every cent. That fund was mine, and you took it without asking. Mom jumped in, her voice sharp. It's family money, Caitlyn. We made a decision for everyone's good. Everyone's good. I almost laughed. They'd funneled cash to Derek for years. Cars, trips, now a wedding, while I built my life alone. Melissa shifted uncomfortably, whispering to Derek. What's she talking about? He brushed her off, muttering, She's overreacting. I turned to Dad, hoping for something, anything. You signed off on this, didn't you? He sighed, his eyes tired. We thought it was fair, Caitlyn. Derek's starting a family. Fair. The word stung. I'd been invisible my whole life, my work dismissed while Derek got a free pass. You didn't tell me, I said, my voice steady but cold. You assumed I'd just take it. Mom waved a hand, dismissive. Let's not ruin dinner. We'll sort it out later. Later wasn't good enough. I pushed my plate away, the food untouched. I checked the account, I said, locking eyes with Mom. $25,000 gone. 10 for Derek's SUV, 15 for Kyle's debts. You all knew. Derek scoffed, but his face paled. That's old news, sis. Why bring it up now? I ignored him, turning to the table. I'm not paying for your wedding, Derek. Not with my money. Melissa gasped softly, her hands twisting in her lap. Mom snapped, Caitlyn, stop this. We're a family. Family. They'd betrayed me, plain and simple. I stood my chair, scraping the floor. I'm done letting you decide what's mine. Justin Perry's words echoed in my head. Call it out. I wasn't the quiet kid anymore, swallowing their choices. I'd built Learn Easy, a multi-million-dollar company, without their help. They didn't know that yet, but they would. A family reunion was coming up, a chance to lay it all bare before everyone. I wasn't after apologies, I wanted the truth out. At a family reunion in Portland a few weeks later, the backyard hummed with laughter, picnic tables overflowing with casseroles and pies. I stood by a folding chair, gripping a water bottle, my nerves taut but focused. The dinner weeks earlier, where Mom and Dad casually announced they'd use my college fund for Derek's wedding, had lit a fire in me. I'd checked the account, confirmed they'd already taken $25,000 for Derek's SUV and Kyle's debts, and I wasn't letting it pass. Justin Perry had pushed me to confront them, and this was the moment before every relative, no secrets spared. I stepped to the center of the yard, my voice cutting through the chatter. I need everyone's attention. Conversations stopped, eyes turning to me. Mom Linda Foster froze mid-bite, her fork hovering. Dad Thomas Foster leaned forward, brow furrowed. Derek Foster. My brother was joking with Kyle Ramsey near the dessert table, oblivious. Melissa Carter, his fiancée, stood nearby arranging flowers. I took a steady breath. You all think I needed that college fund to survive. You're wrong. I built Learn Easy, my own company. It's worth millions. My net worth is $6 million. Aunts gasped. Uncles whispered. A glass tipped over, splashing lemonade. I faced Mom and Dad. That fund was mine. I never used it, paid for college, Stanford, everything myself. But you took $25,000 without asking. 10 for Derek's car, 15 for Kyle's debts. My words were calm, deliberate, each one landing hard. Mom's face reddened. Caitlyn not here, she snapped, glancing at the crowd. Dad shifted, his eyes on the grass, silent as always. Derek's laugh dyed his jaw tight. Kyle shuffled, avoiding my stare. Derek spoke up, his voice sharp. Sis, chill. The car was for work, and Kyle was in a bind. Family steps up. Kyle nodded quickly. It was just once, Caitlyn. No harm done. I fixed them with a look. No harm. You took my money, Dare, and lied about it. The relatives murmured, some nodding, others wide-eyed. Melissa looked at Derek, confused, but stayed quiet. Mom stood, her hands clenched. Caitlyn, you're embarrassing us. We used that money for the family's good. Derek's building a life. Her tone was defensive, unyielding. I shook my head. You didn't ask me, Mom. You decided my money was Derek's to spend. I'm done with that. Freeze the account, no more withdrawals. My voice was firm, unwavering, carrying across the yard. Dad finally spoke, his voice soft. We didn't want to upset you, Caitlyn. His guilt was clear, but he didn't push back against Mom. I turned to the crowd. I built my life without their help. I don't need that fund, and they don't get to touch it. A cousin clapped, others joined their support, unexpected. Derek muttered to Kyle. She's blowing this out of proportion. Kyle shrugged, his face pale. Melissa tugged Derek's arm, whispering something, but he brushed her off. Mom's eyes narrowed. You're being selfish, Caitlyn. We've always looked out for you. Looked out for me. They'd ignored my apps, my awards, while propping up Derek's endless wants. I didn't argue, she wouldn't hear it. The reunion grew tense. Relatives exchanging glances. Kyle slipped toward the gate. Derek trailing him, throwing me a scowl. You didn't have to do this, he hissed. I met his gaze. You didn't have to take what's mine, Dare. Nothing resolved that day. No apologies came. Mom stood firm. Dad stayed quiet. Derek and Kyle deflected. But I'd spoken my truth, and the family knew it. I wasn't their invisible daughter anymore. I'd drawn a boundary, and I'd hold it. In the weeks after the reunion, the consequences unfolded quietly but sharply. Derek Foster and his fiancée, Melissa Carter, faced the fallout of their wedding plans collapsing. The Portland hotel, unwilling to wait after the bounced $15,000 deposit, canceled their booking. A cousin told me they settled for a small ceremony at a local church, with folding chairs and a potluck reception. Melissa wore a modest gown, the guest list cut to 40. Derek called me once, his tone bitter. "You could have stepped up, sis," he said, pinning their scaled-back day on me. I ended the call without responding. His choices weren't my burden. Mom and Dad Linda and Thomas Foster hit a wall. With my college fund now off-limits, I'd had the bank freeze it. They dipped into their retirement savings to cover Derek's wedding and some of his overdue bills. An aunt mentioned they'd pulled out a hefty sum, but it wasn't enough. Their mortgage payments slipped and Mom's usual upbeat chatter turned tense. "We're fine," she told a neighbor, but her voice betrayed worry. They'd always bankrolled Derek new gadgets trips, that SUV, but their safety net was unraveling. Dad's silence on our last call spoke volumes. He knew they'd overstepped, but he didn't reach out. I made a hard choice. I stopped taking their calls. Mom left voicemails, her tone shifting from soft to sharp. "Caitlyn, we're still family. Call us." I didn't. Derek texted first casual, then pushy. "Don't shut us out, sis." I blocked him. Kyle Ramsey sent a vague email about clearing the air over the fund. I trashed it unread. Justin Perry, my anchor, backed me up. "You've carried them long enough," he said over dinner, his eyes steady. I nodded, the weight of their expectations lifting. San Francisco became my reset. I'd landed a lead strategist role at a rising edtech firm drawn to their mission and my success with LearnEasy. I signed a lease on a bright apartment in the Mission District, its windows framing the city's glow. The move was a clean break, leaving behind the Portland house where I'd faced their betrayal over dinner. My new office pulsed with ideas, my team eager to build. For the first time, I felt free, my work valued by people who saw me. I kept my move quiet. My family thought I was still in Portland, maybe stewing over the reunion. A relative called curious. $6 million, Caitlyn, for real?" she asked, half amazed. I confirmed it, keeping details tight. Word spread among cousins, but Mom and Dad stayed silent, clinging to their story that I needed their help. I let them believe it. My reality, my company, my accounts was mine alone. The distance sharpened my focus. In San Francisco, I dove into work. My team launched a new feature for the edtech firm, boosting engagement by 15%. LearnEasy expanded, hiring 3 new developers to target new regions. Justin visited often, his startup growing nearby. We'd walk along the bay, tossing ideas back and forth, my past fading. I wasn't escaping my family, I was building beyond them. One night, a letter arrived, forwarded from Portland. Mom's handwriting, neat and careful. "We need you, Caitlyn," it read. "Derek's trying harder now. No mention of the fund, no regret for their choices." I left it on my counter untouched, then tossed it. I didn't need their words to move forward. My life was mine, built from my own grit. Walking away from my family was the hardest choice, but it brought me clarity. In San Francisco, I carved out a life that was wholly mine. My days buzzed with strategy sessions at the edtech firm, shaping tools that reached thousands. LearnEasy thrived now, with a team of 25 breaking into new markets. My apartment, perched above the city's lights, was a sanctuary for reflection. I wasn't hiding from my past, I was owning my future. I thought back on my family's choices. Mom Linda Foster and Dad Thomas Foster always put Derek first. His cars, his debts, his wedding. They took my college fund, assuming I'd stay quiet. Derek leaned on their support, never questioning, while Kyle Ramsey tagged along, benefiting from their favoritism. Melissa Carter, tied to Derek's choices, faced a simpler life than they'd planned. Their decisions left them struggling, retirement funds drained, bills piling up. I didn't wish them pain, but I couldn't fix their mistakes. Letting go wasn't easy. I missed the idea of family shared meals, old traditions. But I'd been invisible too long, my work ignored, while Derek's half-efforts were praised. Justin Perry saw me clearly. "You're unstoppable, Caitlyn," he'd say, smiling over coffee. He was right. Every milestone Learn Easy Stanford my fortune was mine built without their help. Cutting them off freed me to focus on what I valued. The lesson hit hard: self-reliance is strength. Setting boundaries wasn't betrayal, it was protection. I learned to guard my worth, to walk away from those who took without giving back. My family's favoritism taught me that enabling dependency only deepens it. Derek and my parents learned accountability the hard way, forced to face their choices when the money stopped flowing. This isn't just my story, it's for anyone who's felt unseen. Family can lift you up or hold you back. If you're giving everything to those who don't see you, pause. Build your own path. Set your limits. My family's bias pushed me to prove them wrong, but my success came from proving myself right. That's the truth I hold, and I hope it resonates with you.
Don't you want to try the coffee I made especially for you, honey? My husband James asked with an odd smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I was sitting at my sister-in-law Nina's elegant dining table in her Nashville home, where we gathered for our monthly family brunch. The coffee cup in front of me had a strange, almost metallic smell that made my stomach turn. My name is Christina, and at 29, I never imagined I'd be questioning whether my own husband was trying to poison me. But after 3 years of marriage and countless incidents of accidental food poisoning, I had learned to be cautious, especially around Nina. She had a way of orchestrating situations that left me sick or humiliated, always with that same innocent smile James was wearing now. "How thoughtful of you," I replied, forcing a smile while my mind raced. The aroma wafting from the cup was unlike any coffee I'd smelled before. It reminded me of the time last month when I'd ended up in urgent care after drinking tea at Nina's house. The doctors couldn't explain my symptoms, and Nina had insisted she'd made the tea exactly the same way she made her own. Nina watched me intently from across the table, absently stirring her own untouched coffee. "James has become quite the barista lately," she said with a smirk. "He's been practicing different brewing methods just for you." The way she emphasized "for you" sent chills down my spine. I had noticed James spending more time at Nina's house lately, claiming they were planning a surprise for our upcoming anniversary. But something felt off. The whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room, the strange texts I'd glimpsed on his phone, and now this coffee with its peculiar scent. I lifted the cup, pretending to take a sip while studying their expressions. James and Nina exchanged a quick glance that confirmed my suspicions. Making a show of checking my phone, I stood up abruptly. "Oh, would you look at that? I need to make a quick call for work. Nina, would you mind if I use your study?" As I walked past Nina's place setting, I deliberately stumbled, quickly switching our coffee cups in the confusion of steadying myself. "I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, straightening up. "I'm such a klutz sometimes." Nina waved off my apology with a tight smile. "Just try not to break anything in the study." I nodded and hurried away, my heart pounding. Through the study's doorway, I could still see them at the table. Now I just had to wait and watch. From the study doorway, I watched Nina lift the coffee cup to her lips, and my stomach clenched with anxiety. Part of me wanted to stop her, to warn her, but I needed to know the truth. I'd spent too many nights in emergency rooms, too many hours doubled over in pain, always after sharing meals with them. It wasn't always like this. When I first met James at a friend's wedding in Nashville 3 years ago, he was charming and attentive. Nina had seemed welcoming too, inviting me to family gatherings and offering to help plan our wedding. But looking back, I should have noticed the red flags. The way she would accidentally spill things on my dress at important events, or how my food always seemed to have extra seasoning when she helped cook. The incident started small, an upset stomach here, a mild allergic reaction there. James always had an excuse ready. Maybe it was something you ate earlier, or you must be coming down with something. But the pattern was becoming clear. The worst was 2 months ago, when I ended up hospitalized after eating breakfast at their house. The doctors found traces of something in my system they couldn't identify, but James convinced everyone I must have taken some expired medication. I gripped the door frame, watching as Nina took another sip of the coffee. James was typing on his phone, seemingly unconcerned. My own untouched cup sat cold on the table where I'd left it. The metallic smell still lingered in my nose, making me shudder. A slight tremor in Nina's hand caught my attention. She set down the cup, her face suddenly pale. "James," she said, her voice shaking, "something's wrong." James looked up, his expression changing from confusion to horror as he realized which cup she was drinking from. He jumped up, knocking over his chair. "Nina, what's happening?" Nina's hands were trembling violently now. I feel... She tried to stand but stumbled, grabbing the edge of the table for support. "James, what did you put in that coffee?" I stepped out of the study, my phone already recording. James was beside Nina now, his face ashen. "That wasn't supposed to be your cup," he whispered, but in the silence of the dining room, his words carried clearly. Nina's eyes widened with realization and fear. "Call an ambulance," she gasped, sliding to the floor. "Please, I can't." I dialed 911 immediately, my hands steady despite the chaos unfolding before me. Nina was on the floor now, her body racked with violent tremors. James knelt beside her, panic written across his face as he realized their plan had backfired spectacularly. "Emergency services? Yes, we need an ambulance at 1542 Maple Grove Drive," I said clearly, keeping my phone recording with my other hand. "My sister-in-law appears to be having a severe reaction to something in her coffee. She's conscious, but experiencing tremors." As I spoke to the dispatcher, Nina's eyes locked onto mine. The usual cold calculation in her gaze was replaced by raw fear. "Christina," she gasped, "you switched... You knew?" "Ma'am, the ambulance is on its way," the dispatcher assured me. "Please stay on the line." James was growing more frantic by the second. "Nina, what's happening? That wasn't supposed to... it wasn't meant for..." "Shut up, James," Nina snapped through gritted teeth, her anger momentarily overcoming her distress. "This is all your fault. You said it would just make her sick enough to miss the board meeting next week. You promised it wouldn't be traced." My blood ran cold. The board meeting, where I was scheduled to present my proposal for a major client account, the same account Nina had been trying to land for months at our competing firms. Everything started clicking into place. "The tea last month," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "And the breakfast incident 2 months ago. Those weren't accidents, were they?" Nina's face contorted with another wave of pain. "The tea, that was supposed to keep you home during the Johnson contract presentation. But you went anyway." She clutched her stomach, doubling over. "James said we just needed to discredit you, make clients think you were unreliable." The sound of sirens filled the air outside. James stood up, backing away from both of us. "Nina, stop talking. You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," Nina spat, her words slurring slightly. "We've been planning this for months, ever since Christina started outperforming me at every client meeting. You were supposed to make sure she drank it today." The paramedics burst through the front door, and I quickly stepped aside to let them work. As they loaded Nina onto a stretcher, I stopped recording and sent the video to my private email, then to my lawyer. James stood frozen, watching as his carefully constructed plan crumbled around him. "I'll ride with her to the hospital," I told the paramedics, my voice firm. "After all, I need to make sure my sister-in-law gets the proper treatment." I met James's terrified gaze. "And I'm sure the doctors will be very interested in knowing exactly what was in that coffee." The emergency room at Nashville General Hospital was a flurry of activity as doctors rushed to treat Nina. I sat in the waiting room, my phone clutched in my hand, replaying the recording of Nina's confession. The tremors in her voice, the panic in her eyes, it was all the evidence I needed to prove this wasn't just paranoia on my part. "Family of Nina Anderson?" a nurse called out. I stood up, noting James's conspicuous absence. He'd mumbled something about parking the car 20 minutes ago and hadn't returned. "I'm her sister-in-law," I said, following the nurse through the double doors. "How is she?" "She's stabilized, but we found concerning levels of toxins in her system." The nurse's expression was grave. "The doctor would like to speak with you about some unusual findings in her blood work." Dr. Phillips, a tall woman with graying hair and sharp eyes, was waiting by Nina's room. "Mrs. Bennett, could you tell me exactly what happened before your sister-in-law became ill?" I took a deep breath, pulling out my phone. "I think you should listen to this first." I played the recording from brunch, watching the doctor's expression change from professional concern to alarm. "This is very serious," she said, making notes on her tablet. "The substance we found isn't something that accidentally ends up in coffee. We're looking at deliberate contamination." Just then, James appeared at the end of the hallway, his face pale and sweaty. He'd clearly overheard the doctor's words. "Christina," he started, taking a step toward me. "Let me explain." "Stay back," Dr. Phillips warned, pressing the nurse's call button. "Security to room 412, please." James raised his hands in surrender. "This is all a misunderstanding." Nina was confused. She didn't know what she was saying. "Really?" I pulled up the texts I'd discovered on his phone last week, the ones I'd secretly forwarded to myself. "So these messages between you and Nina about making sure she's out of commission before the Henderson presentation were just friendly conversation." His face drained of color. "You went through my phone?" "After I found the strange pills in your desk drawer, yes, I did." I turned to Dr. Phillips. "Doctor, I've been hospitalized 3 times in the past 6 months with unexplained symptoms. I'd like to know if they match what you found in Nina's system today." The doctor's eyes narrowed. "We'll need to run some tests to compare. Security will make sure your husband remains available for questioning." 2 security guards appeared, positioning themselves on either side of James. He looked trapped, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. "Nina and I," he stammered. "We were just trying to help you slow down. You were working too hard, taking all the big clients. Nina said if we could just make you take some time off." "By poisoning me?" My voice was steady, even as my hands shook with rage. "How long have you been doing this? Was it you who tampered with my food at the Christmas party, too?" James's silence was all the answer I needed. Behind him, I could see Nina's room, where she lay connected to various monitors. Her earlier bravado was gone, replaced by the fear of someone who knew their schemes had finally caught up with them. "Detective Mendoza is on her way," Dr. Phillips said quietly. "She'll want to take statements from everyone involved." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm. The truth was finally coming out, and there was no going back. Detective Mendoza arrived within the hour, her presence commanding attention in the sterile hospital corridor. She was a seasoned investigator who specialized in domestic abuse cases, and she listened intently as I played the recording from brunch and showed her the text messages. "Mrs. Bennett," she said, reviewing her notes, "you mentioned previous hospitalizations. Can you tell me more about those incidents?" I pulled out my phone again, opening a document I'd been quietly maintaining for months. "The first time was in February after a dinner at Nina's house. I had severe stomach pains and dizziness. The second was in April, the tea incident, and then in June after breakfast with them." My voice remained steady as I continued. Each time, the symptoms were similar but just different enough that the doctors couldn't pinpoint a cause. The detective's eyes narrowed as she looked at my detailed log of dates, symptoms, and circumstances. "And you've been keeping records?" "Ever since I noticed the pattern." I hesitated before pulling out another phone from my purse. I also started carrying a backup phone with a different number. I used it to record conversations when I was around them. I have several where Nina and James discuss their plans, though they're careful not to be explicit. In one of the recordings, Nina's voice came through clearly. "The Henderson account is worth millions, James. We can't let her ruin everything we've worked for. Just stick to the plan. A few days of illness should be enough. James's response was equally damning. I've got something stronger this time. She won't make it to the presentation. Detective Mendoza's expression hardened as she listened. Through the window of Nina's room, I could see my sister-in-law was now awake, looking significantly less confident than she had at brunch. The hospital is running toxicology screens, the detective informed me. Dr. Phillips has already identified several substances that don't occur naturally. We'll need samples from your home as well. A commotion down the hall caught our attention. James was arguing with the security guards, his voice rising in desperation. I need to speak with my wife, he shouted. Christina, please, you don't understand. We were trying to protect you. Detective Mendoza stepped between us. Mr. Bennett, you're not helping your case. We've already found evidence of premeditated... Premeditated? James laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the corridor. We were just trying to slow her down. She was working herself to death, taking all the major accounts. Nina said if we could just make her take some time off. By poisoning her, Detective Mendoza's voice was sharp. That's not protection, Mr. Bennett. That's attempted murder. The color drained from James's face. Murder? No, that's not... We never meant to... Then what exactly did you mean to do? I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. When you put something in my coffee this morning, what was supposed to happen? James's silence spoke volumes. Behind him, I could see Nina watching through her hospital room window, her face a mask of fear and calculation. I wondered if she was trying to figure out how to spin this, how to explain away months of systematic poisoning as some sort of misguided attempt at helping me. We'll need both of their phones, Detective Mendoza told the security guards, and I want officers posted at both doors. Nobody leaves until we get the toxicology results. Dr. Phillips entered Nina's room with a tablet in hand, her expression grim as she reviewed the test results. Detective Mendoza and I followed, while James remained outside with the guards. Nina tried to sit up straighter in her hospital bed, but the tremors hadn't completely subsided. The toxicology report shows elevated levels of several substances, Dr. Phillips announced, her voice clinical. Most concerning is the presence of a particular compound that's typically used in pharmaceutical testing. It's not something the general public should have access to. Nina's face paled. That's impossible. James said it was just something to cause mild symptoms. Mild symptoms? Detective Mendoza interrupted, taking out her notebook. Like the ones your sister-in-law experienced over the past 6 months? The door opened and another detective entered, holding an evidence bag. We found these in Mr. Bennett's office desk at the Anderson marketing firm, he reported, presenting several small bottles with clinical labels, along with detailed notes about dosages and reactions. I felt my knees weaken as I realized the full scope of their plan. You were documenting everything? Like some kind of experiment? It wasn't like that, Nina protested, but her voice wavered. We just needed to track what worked. The first few attempts weren't effective enough. You kept showing up to meetings anyway. So you increased the dosages, Detective Mendoza concluded, examining the bottles. Did you know these substances could be lethal in higher concentrations? The room fell silent. James, still visible through the window, sank into a chair in the hallway, his head in his hands. The Henderson account, I said slowly, pieces clicking into place. It wasn't just about that presentation, was it? You needed me out of the way permanently because the client specifically requested me as their lead. Nina's face contorted with a mixture of anger and fear. You were ruining everything. I built that client portfolio for years, and then you show up and suddenly everyone wants to work with you instead. James said he could fix it. By killing me? The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. We weren't trying to... Nina started, but Dr. Phillips cut her off. The concentration in the coffee you drank today, the doctor stated, looking directly at Nina, was significantly higher than previous samples we've analyzed from Mrs. Bennett's earlier hospital visits. If she had consumed it, the outcome would have been severe. possibly fatal. Detective Mendoza turned to the other officer. We'll need a full warrant for both their homes and offices, and contact the pharmaceutical company listed on these bottles. Find out how they obtained these substances. Nina slumped back against her pillows, the fight draining from her face. It wasn't supposed to go this far, she whispered. James kept saying we just needed one more try. I stepped closer to her bed, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. Every time I got sick, every meeting I missed, every client I lost, you were both there, watching, taking notes on how your poison was affecting me. What kind of people does that make you? The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, I could hear James being read his rights as additional officers arrived. Nina stared at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. Detective, I said, turning away from my sister-in-law. I'm ready to make my formal statement now. The trial lasted 3 weeks, but it felt like years. I sat in the courtroom each day, watching as the prosecution methodically laid out their case against James and Nina. The evidence was overwhelming. The bottles from James's office, their detailed notes on each poisoning attempt, the recorded conversations, and text messages discussing their plans. What struck me most was their demeanor throughout the proceedings. Nina, usually so polished and confident, looked small in her defendant's chair. James couldn't even look at me, keeping his eyes fixed on the floor as expert witnesses detailed the potentially lethal effects of the substances they'd been using. Dr. Phillips's testimony was particularly damning. She presented a comprehensive analysis, showing how they had gradually increased the dosages over time, demonstrating clear intent to cause serious harm. The pharmaceutical company representative confirmed that James had stolen the compounds through his college friend who worked in their research department. The defendants showed a calculated pattern of behavior, the prosecutor argued in her closing statement. This wasn't just corporate sabotage, it was a systematic attempt to harm Mrs. Bennett, with a clear escalation that could have resulted in death. When the verdict was finally read, I felt no joy, only relief. Both James and Nina were found guilty on multiple counts, including attempted murder and conspiracy. The judge's words echoed through the silent courtroom. The premeditated nature of these actions carried out against a family member over an extended period demands the maximum sentence. I watched as they were led away in handcuffs, thinking about how greed and jealousy had twisted two people I once trusted into something unrecognizable. Their business, their reputations, their freedom, all sacrificed in an attempt to destroy me. 1 year after the trial, I stood at the podium of the Nashville Business Leaders Conference, preparing to give the keynote speech. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was exactly the kind of opportunity Nina had tried to prevent me from achieving. The Henderson account, which she and James had been so desperate to steal, had led to several more major clients, establishing me as one of the top marketing executives in the region. Success isn't just about talent or hard work, I began, looking out at the sea of faces. It's about integrity, about building genuine relationships based on trust. I paused, letting my words sink in. Sometimes the biggest threats to our success come from those closest to us, but surviving those challenges makes us stronger. After my speech, several young professionals approached me seeking advice. One woman, her eyes bright with determination, asked how I'd maintained my composure throughout the ordeal. I focused on what I could control, I told her. I gathered evidence, trusted my instincts, and refused to let fear stop me from pursuing my goals. Later that evening, I received an email from the Henderson client, confirming they were renewing their contract for another 3 years. I smiled, thinking about how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't trusted my instincts that day at brunch. The local paper had run a small article that morning about Nina and James beginning their prison sentences. I didn't read it. Instead, I focused on the proposal for my newest client project, knowing that the best revenge wasn't about getting even. It was about moving forward and succeeding despite those who tried to hold you back.